Hello and welcome to the Monday night. Actually, this week, obviously, usually it's Tuesday night, but this week it is a Monday night show. And once again, I have Peter joining me over from the US. How are you today, Peter?
I'm doing well, my good man. Looking forward to talking some Bundesliga and a very happy Carnival, a very happy Mardi Gras to everybody for the second consecutive podcast. I'm sporting the beads, representing.
Yeah. It seems never ending, this Carnival at the moment, doesn't it? But yeah.
If only. Yeah, it'll be coming to a close tomorrow. But my dearest and fondest wishes to all our viewers for an excellent Carnival time. Get out there and enjoy yourself on Fat Tuesday, as they call it here in the Deep South.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, just a reminder, guys, that we are in partnership with both Bundesliga boxes and Bulinews as well. So remember to check them out as well. We've talked a lot about Bulinews and how good it is, but yeah, I always recommend checking that out. Okay, so without further ado, let's make a start. So yeah, remember, guys, get your comments in as well. We've already got a couple of comments as well in there, which I'll come to a bit later. But yeah, remember, get your comments on. Let us know what you thought about the weekend's action, and we'll come to any questions that you guys have as well. Okay, so yeah, I see that Balam's already got his comments in as well about the Matchday vlog, which is where we're going to start today. So yeah, Leipzig to win the Bundesliga will be legendary because of East Germany. Well, I'm not sure that everyone in Germany thinks that way, Balam, but yeah, at least someone does. Good match vlog from Mark. I heard Bayern lost. Yeah, they did actually. Yeah, we'll come to that later. And yeah, Borussia Dortmund black kit is nice. Yeah, that was an interesting one as well, which we'll mention a bit later on. So, yeah, I guess where better place to start than the game that I attended on Saturday afternoon, which was, of course, Stuttgart 3, FC Köln 0. So first, I just want to say what an amazing match day experience as well it was down in Baden-Württemberg. I took the train over there, even got talking to a guy from Venezuela and managed to get an invite to Venezuela as well on the train down. So that was another little bonus I got. You know, everyone's so friendly over here in Germany. Which is one of the great things about this country as well. But yeah, the match day itself was amazing. I mean, the Mercedes-Benz Arena is really impressive, and the atmosphere was one of the best I've seen, to be honest. You know, the Cannstatter curve, wow, that was impressive. And I've got to say, the FC Köln fans as well, they were all dressed in fancy dress for Carnival as well, which was fantastic. The noise they were making in the Stuttgart Center before the game was outstanding, but obviously, the fact they went behind after 8-9 minutes, that silenced them quite early on in the stadium. But yeah, what a game it was, and what a performance from Stuttgart as well. I just couldn't believe how well they played. I think both me and you, Peter, on Friday, we were saying that we thought they'd struggle, but I mean, it was an amazing performance. What did you make of it, Peter, tactically then?
Well, I wish I could have been there with you. It was a fantastic match day vlog, by the way. I enjoyed it very much. It made me so homesick and missing my country so much because Stuttgart is a wonderful stadium. The Cannstatter Kurve, they do such amazing things. And I'm glad that you brought up the fact that the Köln Ultras were in their carnival attire.
Yeah,
that is one of the real treats of attending a match in the Bundesrepublik. Also, thank you for mentioning that, people are friendly in Germany and you can talk to strangers and it's encouraged and it's regular. And that's one of the joys of traveling through Germany and being a groundhopper in the Bundesrepublik. To all those groundhoppers out there, please come to the country. Please come to my country. We're so happy to have you. And we'd be so very happy to meet you at a Bundesliga match. You're right. What an amazing surprise. And what a absolute last Tuesday, I was talking to you about how I felt, Genki Haraguchi and Wataru Endo, this axial partnership made no sense. I was giving Waldemar Anton some flack for his performance as a right back. I was expressing some doubt in Borna Sosa's role as a legitimate, legitimately repressed fullback. And boy, did they ever prove us wrong in every sense of the word. This was just a magnificent performance from Stuttgart. It came out of nowhere. It gets one thinking, that Bruno Labbadia, as stubborn as he can be sometimes, and as, set in his ways as he can be with sticking to his tactics and not changing anything, they may have the right Feuerwehrmann here. They may very well have the correct man to help them avoid relegation. So congratulations to Rory. Congratulations to Mark for the wonderful vlog. Congratulations to anyone and everyone who attended this wonderful match. It was certainly one of the treats of the match day. And when I was doing my report for Bulinews on the 1530s, even though Bayern lost, I made that the tactical focus of my column. I had to lead with Stuttgart because I thought it was that important of a story.
Yeah, I just couldn't believe it in the stadium. I was just like gobsmacked at how well they played, really, because they looked like a team that were going for European place, not a team that was struggling. They obviously was second bottom before kickoff, but what a day it was. They actually climbed 3 places as a result of that win. Like the third goal actually even knocked them above Hoffenheim as well by 1 goal. So, I mean, it was a fantastic, and it could have been more, let's be honest. I mean, Genki Haraguchi was amazing. Borna Souza, that free kick was insane. Even the first goal, that was an amazing move as well. And Gil Diaz, you know, he's not really done that much the first few games, but this game was the game he really kind of came to life for me. I mean, he was brilliant in that match. And there was so many good performances and a lot of good performances from the signings as well, because I think Haraguchi hadn't exactly set the world alight in his first few games, but this game he was superb, I thought, really superb.
The joy of live sports, particularly for a sports writer and prognosticator, is being proven dead wrong. And I love being proven dead wrong. If I were right about everything, life would be boring. Yeah. And being proven dead wrong about the Wataru Endo Genki Haraguchi axis was one of the joys of the weekend. It put in my face. And I was really, I mean, you mentioned the Borna Sosa set piece goal. That was absolutely sublime. Yeah. You know, the game could have gone in a different direction had Köln actually utilized their dead ball situation shortly before that goal better.
Yeah, they did,
right after the restart. So what happened after Köln missed that opportunity is that we got ourselves a Swabian swarm.
Yeah.
And they couldn't recover from that. So it's the importance, of course, of doing the right work on the training pitch as well.
Yeah, it was almost a complete performance. I would go that far. Obviously, the big news as well, the fact that Florian Müller was dropped too. For me, I've never been a big fan of Florian Müller, I'm going to be honest, and I think that was a good decision. Despite the fact that the replacement didn't have that much to do, like what he needed to do, he did well. And his distribution was good. He seemed to command a little bit more respect from the defenders. I think Mavropanos was outstanding again after a bit of a sticky run of form as well in the last probably 3-4 games.
Mavropanos indicated that he wanted to be benched last week due to exhaustion. He was just simply exhausted with the pace of matters and all of these transfer rumors and whatnot. So it was good for him to take a match off and clear his head. With Florian Müller, we can talk maybe about that Friday night match against Leipzig a couple of weeks back, where you could see he was shaky in his set piece organization. In organizing how many men he wanted in the wall, in the angles and things like that. So I think that's why Labadia ultimately went with Fabian Bredlow. Instead. And it was a good decision, and it was based on, well, his leadership abilities on the pitch, because keepers, I mean, a keeper has a responsibility to be a good set piece.
Exactly.
And if that's failing, then you have to turn to someone else.
Yeah, and the goalkeeper also, he organises his defence at the end of the day in key moments, on, as you mentioned, on corners, on free kicks, and even in general play. Like, he's the one that's shouting at the defenders and things to get in shape. And I think Bredlow did that a lot better. I think Florian Müller, he just lost his confidence by the end. He had a poor season, which culminated in the horror show really against Leipzig, as you mentioned, when he misorganized the wall. Then he should have saved the shot as well, and it was just, that was the final straw, I think, for Bruno Labbadia. But what a win. I mean, for me, having watched that, I can't see Stuttgart going down now. I mean, it seems as though maybe if he plays that team again, then they're going to get easily enough results to stay up. But we'll have to see. You know, there's no European football for them, but they do have a small matter, and we're going to come to that now. I think Ballum's already mentioned it, which we are going to talk about, and it is the DFB Pokal draw as well. We did get the draw we wanted, didn't we? We got the draw, the FC Nuremberg versus VfB Stuttgart quarter-final. Me and Rory have already been talking about organising a meet-up for the game. I mean, I'll definitely be going to the game. I've already been asking people to try and help me get tickets for it and things, so I'll definitely be going to the game, and hopefully Rory potentially might come as well. If you're in the chat, Rory, I don't know whether you've got an update for us on that, but it would be amazing if we could go there together. and watch the FCN versus the VfB. But for me, it's FCN all the way. We've got to win this. We're going to the semi-final, and then we're going to beat Bayern in the semis. Come on, FCN. By the way, FCN fired the coach as well, Weinzel, today, and they've actually appointed Dieter Hecking, incredibly, as the first team coach, which has not gone down completely well with the FCN fans, but we'll have to see what happens with that one anyway. So yeah, a few other comments as well from around the grounds. Evening show, Germany definitely on my list to visit to vlog. Fans look amazing in atmosphere. Yeah, I can really recommend it, guy. I'm not sure in terms of atmosphere. I really do believe it's the best league in the world. I think I watched football in probably 6 or 7 countries in the world, and I think Germany is definitely the best one out of those, and that includes England for me as well. I just think, the friendly atmosphere, even the tickets are very affordable as well. You're not going to be out of pocket buying a ticket. Whereas in England, you can see a game, but it leaves 2 massive holes in your pockets. If you see a game at Chelsea or Arsenal, you pay minimum £100, I would say. So it's too much really for football. But yeah, definitely get over to Germany around the grounds as well. John Fleming, yeah. Which ground is Mark going to next? Would love to see Dortmund, Union Berlin, and even Schalke. Yeah. I think Union Berlin, I've heard it's very, very hard to get tickets for them. I don't know, Peter, can you clarify that? Dortmund, I think, is possible because it's such a big ground, but I've heard Union is one of the hardest ones to get tickets for.
It is, because the Stadion an der Alte Försterei only seats 22,012.
Yeah.
It is the smallest Bundesliga ground that currently exists. For our potential title contenders, who are also from the East, by the way. Germany, an East German club. They are the club of Biermann and Nina Hagen, who you can. She sang their anthem shortly after reunification, when she was allowed to. So it is a little bit difficult to get tickets to Union, or it was after the pandemic. But you can get them there. There is a little bit of what do you call scalping in English? Touting.
Ticket touting.
Ticket touting outside the stadium sometimes, and you should deal with that. You should use your better judgment with that, because there are scams that
fakes and things.
It can be difficult to see a match at the Stadion an der Alte Försterei, but if you plan ahead, if you book the tickets within 2 or 3 weeks out, you should be just fine. What's really a shame is that the return of the Union Berlin Christmas concert this year, which Dortmund also does. You can easily get tickets to that, but the Union Berlin one is far, far better. It's got much more history and tradition to it. That nobody, after 2 years of being shut down by the pandemic, nobody could get into the Union Berlin Christmas concert other than club members. Kind of had an English feel about it in that sense. But in a couple of years, if you plan on living a few years, then absolutely keep that in your plans, because you don't miss out on that. They sing wonderfully.
It's famous as well. Yeah, it is. I know it's a famous concert. Yeah, but I think regarding the next game, I do have a plan to go to Leipzig definitely before the end of the season as well. Because I think Leipzig's quite easy to get tickets for, really. I think the stadium, they get good crowds, but they rarely have sellouts. That's the thing with Leipzig. They get like 80 to 90% capacity, I think, but not quite full sellout. So that should be possible. As I mentioned, Hoffenheim, but it just doesn't, at the moment especially, it doesn't seem that appealing to go there, because they get the lowest crowds, and also the fact the team's pretty garbage at the moment. Well, let's be honest. I might possibly go to Hoffenheim if they play a very good away team. If a team like Dortmund comes down, or maybe one of the big clubs, that are going to contribute to the atmosphere, then I'd probably go over to Hoffenheim. But Leipzig's definitely on my list, and possibly even a team like Jan Regensburg as well down here in the Zweite Liga. I want to try and get to a lot more grounds as well in around Bavaria, and maybe even Filzing as well. I think Ballam's famous club. I don't know that much about them, but I did look up. They're in the Regionalliga, I think, the Regionalliga Bayern. So they're possible I'll get over there as well. Anyway, what about you, Peter? Do you plan on getting to any new grounds in the when you get back to Germany, or?
Oh, absolutely. Pretty much all of the I call them the cathedrals, the temples, the churches. They are my churches. All of the Bundesliga grounds. If I'm, as a Kaiserslautern born man who has been supporting the FCK since he was old enough to say the words Rote Teufel, I believe that the Betzenberg is the most hallowed Bundesliga footballing cathedral in the Bundesrepublik. But and Lautern fans may not be pleased to hear me say this, I enjoy going to Mainz. I enjoy going to Stuttgart. I enjoy going to Freiburg. I enjoy going. I have not had a bad experience. Actually, going to Sinsheim was the only time that I thought to myself, I'm not sure this was such a great idea. Okay, and the fans, there were some nice people there, and they were trying. But other than that, I didn't regret not even going to Wolfsburg. We were talking about in the watch along a little bit how Wolfsburg and Leverkusen, they were once as reviled as Hoffenheim and Leipzig are now. Yeah. But what happened is that the ultras, they got involved. They started welcoming people to the grounds. They started doing creative choreos and banner protests. Protests very important to German fans. Doesn't matter what you're protesting against, just protest against something. So they grew and they matured and they grew on us, these company teams, a little bit. Yeah. So I even enjoyed my trip to Wolfsburg. And that's that.
I think Hamburg's definitely one as well, to see the HSV and obviously St. Pauli as well. I mean, I know that I wouldn't be very popular if I went to both games in a couple of days, I don't think. But because I don't think there's much love lost between those two clubs. But definitely it's something that I'd like to see potentially as well. But anyway, interesting question from Gary Jones as well. You might like this one. Would Mark ever go to see some of the fallen giants of the DDR league, like Dynamo Dresden, Carl Zeiss Jena, and Hansa Rostock? Wow. Or the BFC Berlin? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, that is something I'd like to do, actually. I've actually been to Dresden as a tourist, but I've never seen the football club. And also, I've been to Chemnitz as well. I think they have a club, right? Chemnitz. I mean, that's hardcore. Karl-Marxstadt,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of the ultras in the East are still right-leaning. Actually, Chemnitz I've never been to. But as luck would have it, I've been to Dresden. I've been to Dynamo Dresden. I've been to Carl Zeiss Jena, and I've been to Hansa Rostock. Rostock is, it's a very nice, right there on the Nordseeküste there. It's a nice little Hanseatic city. It's not unlike Bremen, sort of a proud independent merchant town and stuff like that. I enjoyed my trip there, and I like the ultras. Dresden is an insane atmosphere. The ultras there are very devoted, and they're very committed, very big into the Pyro, if I pronounce that in English. And Carl Zeiss Jena is just their motto is Fußball verrückt. That is football and crazy. And that's they are a bunch of crazy people, and they relish in their craziness. So
it's a nice city as well, Dresden. It's a really nice city to visit as well if you're a tourist too. Yeah. It's it's not that far from Nuremberg either. I think it's only like a 2-hour drive or something like that. It's not that far, so I might go over there. But I think they're in the Dry Liga at the moment, right? In the third league, I think. Yeah, they are. They're definitely not in the second league, so they must be in the third. But maybe when they get back up to the second, I'd like to see them. They have crazy away fans as well. They have huge numbers of away fans. I know that.
Well, they went, when they were playing Hertha in the Pokal a couple of years ago, 3 years ago or so, they completely invaded the Olympiastadion and outnumbered the Hertha supporters, and had some really nice choreos and pyro displays. I don't mind pyro displays as long as they're done safely. I think that, they can be a nice little artistic express. Don't throw the frickin' things on the pitch. Yeah. But if you do it in the stands, and, you can buy flares these days that are, that are safe, that maybe they just have some smoke and some color and things like that. Yeah. There were a lot of well-coordinated pyro displays in the Bundesliga towards the end of last season as fans returned to the stadium from the pandemic, and they were enjoyable and fun.
Yeah, it is good to see them. If you've ever seen a pyro kind of in person, it is definitely worth seeing it.
Just take your safety precautions and we'll welcome pyro.
Yeah. As long as you've seen it from the other side of the stadium, I think that's the best place to see it from, really. Anyway, yeah, so let's get back to our match review as well. So, yeah, I think the next game we've got to talk about is obviously the Gladbach versus Bayern. As Ballum said earlier, Bayern Munich did lose, and they lost 3-2 in their hell. I think the Borussia Park is basically their definition of hell, really, for Bayern Munich. They don't like going there. They have a very, very poor record against Borussia Mönchengladbach. And, but I mean, before we go any further on this one, there's one big point we have to talk about in there. I mean, there was one moment-defining change, and that was the red card for Upamecano after just 8 minutes for a push on player. I mean, I think all of Germany's been talking about this over the last few days. Was the red card correct, Peter? What do you think?
I would not have given it. Basically, if you look at the replay, there was no contact below the belt. There was no contact between the knees. This was a hand on his shoulder that caused Playa to lose his balance. Playa, of course, deliberately embellished the fall, and I'm not a fan of that. According to the letter of the law, however, he was the last man. There was no one else besides the keeper to beat. So Upamecano, and one feels for Upamecano because you can tell that he was doing his best not to foul. But he did put the hand on the shoulder, unfortunately, and that did affect Playa's balance. And the embellishment, we don't like it in German football. That's more of an Italian thing. But according to the letter of law, it was a red. Some interesting things to point out about that match, and I did make it my tactical focus, was that if you look at the XG, it depends on which source you're looking at. But the sources, I looked at a variety of different sources and went ahead and averaged the XG for my piece in the tactical column. The average was Gladbach 1.95, Bayern 1.38, and this is from a team that was playing shorthanded, reduced to 10 men, decimated in the proper sense that the word is, for 82 minutes. So Bayern, they're expected to play, even when they're shorthanded, they're expected to play as a team that is not. And in that sense, Bayern rose to the occasion. They were able to grab the equalizer before the break after a sustained amount of offensive pressure. They did not look like the outnumbered side at all throughout this entire match. And I would say they kept playing until Marcus Thuram sealed it with the 3-0 or 3-1. I should say. The goal that Matthijs Tell pulled back had more to do with the Stefan Leiner mistake. Stefan Leiner was absolutely awful, by the way. That is, good Lord, he's slow, and poor Joe Scally on the sidelines was probably ripping his heart out. In any event, they played as you would expect Bayern to play, despite being shorthanded. And even if Nagelsmann had some complaints, and the very, very special insult to Tobias Welz, special German insult that has to do with male potency, and then later apologized on his Instagram feed. Despite some of the grousing, griping, bleeding, whatever you want to call it, I liked the play that we saw on the pitch from Bayern throughout the match, because they didn't want to make excuses on the pitch with their play. They certainly did not. So that's how a champion plays. We could probably still consider them favorites for the title race. What's great about the Bundesliga table right now is that you got 3 teams.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Points. That's amazing after 21 match days. But Bayern are probably still the favorites, I would imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I was obviously, if you don't know, in the Bundesliga grounds, they often show the scores as well when the goals come in. A lot of Stuttgart fans were very happy when that 3-1 goal went in for Gladbach. Yeah. But I mean, at the time, we didn't know that they were down to 10 men because it doesn't mention the red card. So I remember being so shocked. But then when I saw that Upamecano obviously got sent off after just 8 minutes, I would agree with you. I think the red card was a little bit soft in truth. But I mean, we have seen Bayern over the season. Maybe they have had a few decisions that have gone their way. So, I mean, I do believe that it roughly evens itself out over the season, unless you're FC Augsburg, who seem to get done over every week. But still, I think as for Bayern, they definitely get a few decisions that go in their advantage. advantage, I think. But yeah, I mean, this was an unfortunate one, and I think they played well despite being down to 10 men. They played well, and they probably were the better side for periods. But I think Gladbach really picked them off well. I think Gladbach were really, really good picking them off on the break. Hoffmann deserves a lot of credit. He was fantastic. Thuram as well, obviously, with the third goal. He did miss a few chances as well on top of that, but that's his first goal for a while. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was his first goal since the return from the World Cup. He's not done as well since then. And obviously that was a big goal for him personally as well, to score against a team like Bayern.
Thuram does have 11 league goals this season.
Yeah,
so he was very much in the race for the Torjägerkanone, the big cannon that we give out, to Lewandowski every year, and now we're going to give it out to somebody new for the first time.
It is going to be interesting who wins it this year, because it's very unclear, isn't it? I mean, obviously it looked like Füllkrug for a long period, but he's not scored for a while now as well, the Werder Bremen striker. So it is going to be interesting to see who wins that. My money would probably be on Nkunku, though. I think now he's coming back. I think he's only 1 or 2 behind Füllkrug, so he's probably favourite for me at the moment. But you never know. Maybe even Muani, because he's started scoring on a regular basis again now. He
scores, he assists, he's everything. Yeah. He's the best Eintracht Frankfurt statistically in a season since detailed assist data was collected. I believe it was in the early aughts, maybe 2003, 2004. It took until then for Bundesliga stats keepers to actually mark assists. So Muani is, granted, since 2003 only, the greatest statistical score point Eintracht Frankfurt player ever.
10 goals and 10 assists in 21 games. Pretty damn impressive, really. It's incredible. And I think a good few in the Champions League and the Cup as well on top of that. So
he's amazing. We're so happy to have him. He's a gem, and we're so very pleased that he's playing in Germany.
And he got that goal in the semi-final of the World Cup as well, which is quite a big coup. And I think he ended up playing a good chunk of the final, didn't he? So that was a big kind of coup for the Eintracht and also for the Bundesliga as well. But yeah, anyway, Bayern are beaten. It's only the second league defeat this season, but the 9th game without victory this season, which is unlike them. They've only won 12 out of the 21 games, which is actually 2 less than Dortmund now. So yeah, it's not going that well for them, is it? Do you think they will win the title, Peter? Or
I sincerely hope not. As somebody who, it's important to note that. And I see a question here from Dan, as a matter of fact, when he talks about plastics in the Bundesrepublik. There are a lot of those. There are a lot of people who want to support the winning team, and they want to support the team that wins all of the time. So you will see a lot of Bayern fans who might have never been to Bavaria, who might have never even been to the Allianz. And Bayern are supported by a lot of big celebrities in Germany as well. The first one that comes to mind is the one that just got out of prison, Boris Becker.
Not the biggest fan in the UK. Anyway.
Right. So there is a lot of that. I do hope that Bayern doesn't win the title. I also hope it's not a case of Bayern defeating itself. I think that. In my tactical column this week, I found the in-game tactical switches from Nagelsmann to be borderline interesting. I thought his tactical selection at the beginning of the match contained too many rotations and was too conservative and was too incoherent. And it was almost asking for something like this with Upamecano to happen, because he was leaving the defense wide open with all of these, with Jamal Musiala, with Leroy Sané on the bench, and Cancelo he began the game on the bench as well. So I hope it's not a case of Bayern just defeating Bayern with Nagelsmann getting a little bit too zany with the tactics. I would like to see, Bayern legitimately defeated. I'd like to see them legitimately defeated by Union Berlin next week. After what we saw this weekend from Union Berlin against Schalke, with our 4th consecutive 0-0 draw involving Schalke. No, I don't. It's difficult to consider Union title contenders once again.
I think we need to kick Schalke out for boredom, to be honest with you. 4 0-0s from a Bundesliga team, that's almost unheard of, It's,
they're better than some. I think, they're obviously better than the Schalke side that got relegated during the
clearly
one campaign. They're better than Greuther Fürth last year.
Yeah.
And at the very least, I would say the defensive solidity, particularly with Moritz Jens now in central defense, is much more inspiring than what we saw from Bielefeld last year. So I don't want to kick him out for boredom necessarily, as I would have, some of the teams that I've seen in the league the last couple of years.
To be honest, I don't think Schalke are completely down, in truth, because as you mentioned, they've got so much defensive solidity. If they can all of a sudden nick a 1-0 against Stuttgart next week, then they're back in it. You know what I mean? I think the bottom line is for teams at the bottom, they need to make sure they don't get beat. That's the first thing, you know what I mean? And then if they can start nicking a goal here and there, they can stay up. It's not impossible because, 4-0-0s, it doesn't look good on paper, and it's not been pretty to watch at any of those 0-0s. But at the same time, on a positive note, it's 4 games, 4 clean sheets. So,
Yeah, I mentioned that. I mean, Ralf Fährmann, who is now the keeper replacing Alexander Schwolo, the Cadillac keeper that they brought in from Hertha Berlin, has not been scored upon.
The best keeper in the league.
No, he's not as good as Kobel or Casteels. He's not up there in the race for clean sheets just yet. But damn, if I were to if somebody told me 4 weeks ago, a month ago, that we would be talking about 4 consecutive Ralf Fährmann clean sheets.
It is incredible. That's an incredible stat, really, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, what a change from Thomas Rice.
Yeah, I don't think Schwolo would have kept those clean sheets. Although, I mean, in the Union match, there really was only one legitimate scoring chance from Union all afternoon. Daniel Doeki, the Dutch defender, put an excellent header on target. I think it was in the 23rd, 26th, something like that. But after that, Union really couldn't manage anything offensively. They were exhausted. They just, from the Ajax game, and they're not particularly an explosive team anyway. So I think you're going to see a lot of 0-0, 1-0, 2-0s from Union Berlin in the coming week.
I think we actually mentioned that this could be 0-0. Both of us said we wouldn't be surprised if this was 0-0 because I knew that Union would make a few rotations, and obviously the likes of Becker started on the bench as well, and he's quite key, but he can't play every single game, because obviously they played Ajax last Thursday and this Thursday as well. So the fixtures are really starting to pick up. He's the kind of guy they needed in this game for me, but obviously he only got the last few minutes. But it probably was the worst match of the season in truth, Ballum. Yeah, I would say it was. As Peter mentioned, only one real scoring chance in 95 minutes.
Well, actually, Schalke Wolfsburg in the previous round was
it was, and also the Köln Schalke game was dire as well, actually. So they've had a few really poor games, but at least they're fighting, at least they want to stay up. And as you mentioned, the last time they were in the Bundesliga, they were getting battered week in, week out, like 3-0, 4-0, 5-0. This year they've tried,
That was the year of 5 head coaches and Christian Wolfs and
crazy, crazy. So let's mention the other team that are in the title race. We've already mentioned Bayern and Union. What there was to say about Union this week, anyway. But obviously Borussia Dortmund going from strength to strength. The big team news, obviously, the fact that Bellingham was dropped. Obviously not dropped because of poor form, but because of rotation. Obviously Aller was also dropped, and Donald Marlin, a player that's not really set the league alight in the Bundesliga at all, has he? But he obviously got a goal. I didn't think this was despite the fact it was 4-1, it wasn't a vintage BVB performance. I think Hertha contributed to the game, especially at 0-0 and then again at 2-0. I thought they were quite good in those periods too. When they got back to 2-1, they had a few half chances to even get back to 2-2. But in the end, it was that wonder free kick. Another really good free kick this weekend from Marco Reus that sealed the deal. But I mean, for me, this was more of a routine win rather than a special win. The scoreline looks like they played really well, but I thought Hertha were well involved with this game, Peter.
I thought this was an excellent game. This was a wonderful treat to watch on Saturday on so many different levels. You're right. Hertha did, the scoreline doesn't necessarily reflect how well Hertha played. They did exceed our expectations. Sandro Schwarz's new 3-5-2, actually he kept the same personnel in place and he kept the same basic constellation, but he moved Marvin Plattenhardt and Marco Richter back to like wing-back positions and had Lucas Toussaint and Suat Serdar sort of working as buttressing attackers. But the real treat for me was actually Edin Terzic's Borussia Dortmund tactics. He stuck with his 4-1-4-1, but he made it a very interesting, what us tactics heads call a 6-7-8 stepstone, which is you have 1-6, you have 1-8, and you have this sort of stepstone 7 in there. And Salih Özcan was that player. He was working just in front of Emre Can and just behind Marco Reus. And it just to watch it in action was a real treat, because Can could drop back and help out the defense. The fullbacks, Wolf and Ryerson, could come up and get involved. Another amazing, he put Malen up there. You mentioned the big news here is that Jude Bellingham wasn't a part of the Dortmund starting 11. And when I first saw the team sheets, I thought to myself, they're not going with Bellingham? What, are you nuts? How do you get box-to-box coverage without the best box-to-box player that the Bundesliga has seen in the better part of a decade? But with this 6-7-8 stepstone, he made it happen. And he got a goal for Malen out of it. Malen needed it. He needed the extra confidence. Adeyemi scored again. Unfortunately, he did get injured in the match as well and will be out for 3 weeks, but at least 3 weeks. But Terzic arranged things so that the actors in his squad that needed that extra bit of confidence could get it. And they could get it in this game. And he took the opponent seriously. He read the tactics well. He came up with an excellent match plan. And the match plan worked. It worked in getting Malen a goal. It worked in getting Adeyemi a goal. Julian Brandt, good Lord. We can't stop talking about him. Everybody in German football circles, this is amazing. He is in the form of his life. No one has ever seen him play so well. No one has ever thought he could play so well. He's dug deep, and he's just made amazing. We couldn't be more happier for him, because the guy has been sort of drifting in and out of the German national team. And something else that's important to note is that not that I am Tobias Escher, the great German tactics writer, but the reason that Dortmund never were able to contend for the title before wasn't that they couldn't stand tall against the good opposition, is that they always messed up against the relegation race teams. And Escher would point this out every year. Every year it would happen. To take an example, it was just last year that they lost to Hertha in the final match day before the Christmas break. And they also had trouble with Augsburg. They had trouble with Bielefeld. I think they lost to Köln. They lost to
Bochum as well last year, right?
Bochum last year, and all of this stuff. So what we're seeing now with this Dortmund is that it's the inverse of the old Lucien Favre Dortmund. The Lucien Favre Dortmund, I don't think he had like a 33% win percentage against the relegation race teams.
It's crazy.
And then so when Dortmund play what you consider to be an inferior opponent, you almost expect them to blow it at this point. That's how we've been conditioned after all of these years and everything. This new Dortmund, under Edin Terzic, who seems to be absolutely the right man from the job, they take the so-called inferior opponent seriously. He comes up with these really clever and imaginative tactical plans, and they execute. That's why this Dortmund is a title contender, as opposed to the Dortmund that we've seen from years past.
Yeah, these are ridiculously exciting times for Dortmund, aren't they? It's like I agree with you. This is the best I've seen Dortmund in a long, long time, possibly even since the Klopp days. I know Lucien Favre had good times as well, but his teams always, as you mentioned, they hit terrible runs and fell apart. Like, I actually remember, I think the Lucien Favre year, they played in Nuremberg, actually, and I was at the game. And I think Dortmund, they had 12 shots on target that day, and it finished 0-0. And that was the start of their downfall. And Nuremberg were absolutely dreadful that year. I think they won 3 or 4 games. That was all in the whole season. And somehow Dortmund couldn't beat them at home. And I think in the Signal Iduna, they beat them 7-0 earlier in the season as well. So that tells you everything you need to know, really. And I think at that point, going into that game, I think Dortmund were either 8 or 9 points clear at the top. And this was in February. It was actually incredibly, I got a notification on my social media that was 4 years ago today. actually. So there you go, in 20th of February, and I think they were 8-9 points clear. And then they just after that, I think they had 5 or 6 games without a win, and Bayern just caught right up to them.
Well, it's a different year, my good man.
Yeah.
We've got at least 2 title race contenders in Dortmund and Bayern. Union, you never know. I mean, I've said yes, I've said no. They surprise me, they disappoint me. Let go. And we have to include Leipzig in the discussion as well. Like it or not, they would also be title contenders. So 3.5.
Come on, Frankfurt too. I think we can't completely rule them out. They're only 5 points adrift. I know they've not been as good for me since the restart, but they're still scraping wins at times, But they're not looking as convincing. That the fluidity isn't there with like some Mario Götze probably hasn't been quite as good since the restart either for me.
Let's not. When we did our Rückrunde preview, I tipped Eintracht Frankfurt to win the title. That's how enthusiastic I was at that time about that team at that time. Now I just don't know. I think the problem is that Oliver Glasner, he doesn't rotate a lot, and he sticks with this. He's not really a tactical tinker, which can be a good thing. It absolutely can. But we'll see. I mean, they certainly played very well against Bremen this weekend. Bremen were putrid. So, I mean, it was a pretty bad game, actually a very one-sided game in the Saturday evening Topspiel. Yeah. But, some of these games, some of these decisions, we were talking last week about his decision to start Makoto Hasebe, 39-year-old Makoto Hasebe, in 3 consecutive matches. Yeah. Good Lord. Don't do that.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, that is ridiculous. And that cost him the point. Well, I'm not going to blame only Hasebe, let's be honest, but he didn't play well against Köln at all. That cost him potentially a massive 3 point. Even if he could have got a point out of that game, every point counts at the end of the day. But what do you make of them this weekend? Like, for me, they were good, but not as good as what they were before the break. I think before the break in that game, they would have scored 4 probably minimum, because as you mentioned, Bremen didn't turn up really in this game. Their form's a little bit funny at the minute, Bremen, isn't it? Because I think Mitchell Weiser has kind of been picking up a few knocks and suspensions. He's not been as regular. For me, he was one of the players of the Hinrunde, Mitchell Weiser. He was outstanding. I think he ended up with like 7 or 8 assists in the Hinrunde, which is crazy. And a lot of them were for Nico Füllkrug as well. And even Füllkrug, I think he's only got 1 goal since the restart as well. And his performances haven't been quite as influential. The likes of Dutch as well has not been quite as young. But they're a funny side. They've still had a couple of good wins in the Rückrunde. But what do you make of Bremen in this game then first, before we go on to Frankfurt a bit more?
The problem with Bremen is not only Mitchell Weiser being absent, but also the injury to Romano Schmid and the problems that Leonardo Bittencourt has been having. Those are the 2 direct buttressing attackers that work behind Niklas Füllkrug and Marvin Duksch. So what we've been seeing a lot of Niklas Schmid, Jens Stage, the Dane, who is unfortunately, still struggling to adapt to life in the Bundesliga. He did get his first Bundesliga goal a couple of weeks back, but it was kind of a gift. So the problem that we're seeing there is the buttressing attack. The regular buttressing attackers are out. The absence of Mitchell Weiser hasn't helped. Lee Buchanan and Anthony Jung have been having problems filling in as the wingbacks. A Bulgarian that I was really impressed with, Ilya Kruev, had a horrible form dip. He was the bolt-lock sweeper that stood in front of the back 3 in that sort of 3-5-2, 4-2-1-2, whatever you want to call it. And the Cathedral City Massacre, when Köln completely caught them with their pants down in the first game back from the break, they've had trouble recovering from that. They've had on set pieces they've looked very poor. It's actually Duksch and Füllkrug almost seem like they're not planning their finishing. They're not planning their set piece designs on the pitch very well. I think we have a team that was rattled confidence-wise, and it's affecting their weekly training regimen. They may be trying to do too much. They may be trying to get too fancy. And the absences, of course, yeah. I mean, this is a team that really needs its regular actors in place. I think they could still bounce back. I do.
Yeah. At the end of the day, their goal was only to stay in the division anyway, so they're going to do that easily. They probably only need a couple more wins. So it's goal achieved, but at one point it looked like they could even push for European place. But I think it might not even be good I think it's a bit too early for Werder to get back into Europe. They need probably 2-3 years to solidify as a Bundesliga club again, and then they can start pushing for the European place. To be honest, I think 12th or 13th would be okay for Werder this season, in truth. But I do miss how well they were playing early on in the season, especially in the Hinrunde, because it was great to see Werder playing so well. They even gave a few teams hammerings, didn't they? I remember they beat Gladbach 5-1, and they were really, really good early season.
Don't forget that historic comeback against Dortmund from 0-2 down.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, that was one of the results of that could cost Dortmund the title this season. Who knows? Yeah, that was more like a typical Dortmund performance early on in the season, wasn't it? Like what we expect from them. But yeah, they've had some memorable results, but just at the moment they're in a bit of a slump and struggling to really create and stay in games at the minute. But congratulations to Frankfurt. Another goal from Kolo Muani. Very comfortable performance. Again, though, Lindstrom was a little bit wasteful at times, which is a bit worrying at times, isn't it?
That is. I think Kamada also had overall a not very good game. The good news for Frankfurt is that I think Philipp Max has really arrived. He had an excellent game. And Ansgar Knauf, who filled in for Aurelio Buta, also did very well. So they were extremely strong with the wingbacks. You bring up Lindstrom. He's such a talented player, such an uber talented player, and it's always frustrating when he gets into these little form dips and has problems with his final product. But that's still going on.
Yeah.
Glasner, like I said, he's set in his ways. He's like Labadia in that respect. If I were training Frankfurt, I would give some thought to maybe letting Boré work in Lindstrom's role, even though he's a classic, supposedly a classic center forward target man. I think he could work in that role.
Yeah, I definitely think Lindstrom needs a game or two break because he looks frustrated because the early work is so good. He can dribble past 1-2 players, no problem. Then he either shoots high and wide or he crosses to nobody in the center. And it's a little bit frustrating for him at the moment. But the problem is it could cost Frankfurt, and he already has cost Frankfurt actually in a couple of games since we came back, this wastefulness. And, I think he is a young guy. I think he's only 20 or 21. He needs probably a game or two break. And I would agree that Boré could be an interesting suggestion to stick behind Muani as well, because whenever he comes on, he always looks good and dangerous, but yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the next game. So, I think the other game that I wanted to talk about in a little bit of detail was obviously the Sunday night thriller, really, between Leverkusen and Mainz. And first of all, Peter, I've got to give you credit. You did tip Mainz to win that game as well, which not many people would probably have done. But, we did see a lot of rotation from Leverkusen, which was expected, especially the starting lineup was particularly... I wouldn't say weak looking because they've got a lot of quality, but Asmoon came in, obviously Hudson-Odoi came in, Adley came in, and the likes of Schick, Frimpong, Wirtz, and Lozek were all obviously benched. But I think, this for me was just a really enjoyable game to watch, to be honest. It was a bad-tempered game. I think there ended up being 10 bookings and 1 red card in this game, which is very, very bad-tempered, and 2 penalties, one which was missed and one which was scored. And that was a starting point, really, wasn't it? For me, what looked like a little bit of a soft penalty, if I'm being honest, a foul on Asmoon, which went to VAR. The referee upheld the penalty, but it was Tapsoba who was sent up to take the penalty, and he slapped it straight at the goal. Well, not really straight at the goalkeeper. I'm being a bit harsh on the keeper there for Mainz, but he did miss the penalty. Then just a few minutes later, he was punished. Bit of a scrappy goal once again, really, Leverkusen with poor defending, which we've seen too often in recent weeks under Xabi Alonso. And Anthony Chachi, is that right? Yeah, another funny one to pronounce. Or khaki, okay, yeah. Or catchy, yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
let us know what the official pronunciation is, guys. He kind of bundled home after a bit of head tennis in the area, really, wasn't it? He bundled home via a deflection, but it was, Mainz players were really celebrating because they felt like they'd been hard done by with the Leverkusen penalty just a few minutes before. Then quite a nice counter-attack, really. Leverkusen were level through Amiri. I always get mixed up between them two, Amiri and Adli, but he scored, yeah. Obviously a man that's not always been overly popular with the Leverkusen fans, signed for pretty big money a few years ago, and I think he's been okay this season, but I think last season he ended up being hauled out to like Torino on loan or something. So his career seems to be slightly rebuilding there in Leverkusen. But obviously on the stroke of half-time, Barreiro struck them back in front. Then a crazy moment in the beginning of the second half when the ball just wouldn't go in for Leverkusen, would it? I think they hit, was it twice off the post? And then eventually Schick, the substitute, smashed home for 2-2. Then it was all Leverkusen, really. It looked as though Leverkusen would probably get the win at 2-2. But then it was a great piece of play which unleashed Widmer. And then obviously he was dragged back very wrong for me. It was almost like rugby tackled by Adli in the filling in the right back position. And then that gave the penalty to the best penalty taker in the Bundesliga, I would say, Ingvarts, and he once again sent the goalkeeper the wrong way for what was really a very impressive win for an excellent Mainz side under Bo Svensson, Peter.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a wild and crazy and immensely entertaining match. Just a thriller to cap the round, and another great weekend of Bundesliga football, with the exception of one or two games. Yeah, what can one say about this one? I mean, Leverkusen were very unlucky. They hit the aluminum, as we call it, and we don't call it the woodwork in Germany because it's not made of wood.
Yeah. I always like that, how they say the aluminium.
And I think they won the XG battle. They looked, as you said, as you pointed out, they looked surefire candidates to win the match until that late foul. Of course, poor Edmund Tapsoba, he broke the Leverkusen penalty curse. They had missed 11 times from the spot. Yeah. They hadn't converted from the spot in like 18 months in the league. So he broke that curse, and now he started another curse. You just feel for the lad. And, but sympathy for Leverkusen in this case is hard to, it's hard to come by, because there were more defensive errors from Kosunu and Ta, and also Sinkgraven, who, you wonder whether or not he should be starting in the first place. After Tapsoba missed that penalty, Xabi Alonso had the responsibility to get him off the pitch for the second half. I mean, the kid was, he was clearly all over the place. I mean, his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't focus on the game. He really needed to get him out. Wirtz did not start. I don't know why we're managing his workload so tightly now. I mean, Leverkusen, there were a lot of rotations in the Bundesliga this weekend that I just didn't agree with. These were from teams that were coming off midweek matches, but they have the next week off. So you don't need to rotate, as much as Xabi did. And I tried to follow the tactics of this. It was, of course, very, very difficult. I think Xabi, he started with a 4-4-3, then he wanted a 4-2-3-1, then he wanted a 4-4-2, and all this. All of the instructions were too complex and just made a confused hash of things. Svensson's 11, this 3-4-3 with Ludovic Ajorque, who we've talked a lot about, is, even if he doesn't get on the score sheet always, he's incredibly important to this team, the way that he draws coverage and enables the likes of Jae-Sung Lee and Karim Onisiwo, or indeed whoever is starting there. Behind him, some space. In this case, Kachi was a beneficiary of it. So was Danny DaCosta, surprise starter, even with Captain Sylvain Widmer back. DaCosta started, and he had a very, very strong game, I think. So wildly entertaining fun, even though Leverkusen were unlucky in a lot of different spells. And even though they beat Mainz in terms of XG, I thought this was a deserved victory for Mainz because they were more stable, they were more coherent, and they were, and their trainer, as you English call the manager, who would be a front office guy. Their trainer made better decisions. And so I think this was a deserved win. I mean, that's ultimately why I did tip them to win, because I thought that they would be the more stable side. Yeah. And I really like what I'm seeing from Mainz at this point. I thought that Leverkusen could perhaps get back up to the European places this year. And that 7th place spot, okay, not exactly the most coveted spot, the Europa Conference League playoff spot, but I would tip Mainz to get that at this point in time. That Mainz probably have a better chance.
Yeah, they've got an underrated squad, actually, Mainz. They really do. Like, I think they've made a lot of good signings over the last year. Jorke, I really like him.
Incredible signing. And he's an incredible signing, and they have a great coach in Bo Svensson. Yeah. Also, pardon, by the train tracks here. The management team, the managerial team. What do you call the managerial team in English? If the manager is on the pitch, is the coach, is the trainer, then what are the front office guys? What do you call them?
Yeah, the sporting director or the director of football. I think often originally we call it the director of football, but I think they kind of changed it to the sporting director. It depends on the club, though. In England, every club has a different system, actually. Right. Like I think only some clubs, although more and more now, have directors. But in the past, the reason why we call it the manager is because the manager did everything, basically. He wasn't just a trainer. Mm-hmm. He was the trainer and he did the signings and all of that side of things as well. So I think it might even have been Guardiola who was like the first one to properly implement this system into England, actually, where like you had a director of football who took care of the more business side of things, and then you had the trainer who was so now we have this system more, but a lot of people still use the word manager because that's what we always called it, but I think the official term now, the official term is head coach, and then the director of football. That's what we call it.
All the German clubs have different systems too. But okay, so the two managers of Mainz, Christian Heidel, who is the sporting CEO, I guess you would say, and Martin Schmidt, the former Augsburg trainer, who is the sporting director. Yeah, they came in when Mainz were threatened by relegation in the 2020-21 campaign, and Ruven Schröder was fired. They came in, they brought in Bo Svensson. And since then, they've rebuilt this team in a patient and methodical and really intelligent manner. And I know that Christian Heidel did a terrible job at Schalke, but for Mainz, he is the man. And Martin Schmidt, look, that a Jorke signing, brilliant. Also like Hensche Olsen, they just quietly made all these great signings in the January transfer window, and they had a good offseason too. Yeah. So
Stach is a good player too. I really like Anton Stach. I know in my opinion, he's kind of dropped off from the early season form. I think in the first 10 games, he was one of the players of the Bundesliga, but I wouldn't say he was able to maintain quite that high level, but he's definitely he's a player that can still improve because he's still young, the under 21 international, I think. So, yeah, and I think it was unfortunate with Leach as well. He was a player that, because he started well, I think he ended up getting depression or something like that, right? Yeah. He started really well, I think. But
yeah, well, it was, he ended up having some mental health problems. So has Bremen's Niklas Schmidt. He was another one who went public with his mental health struggles during the first half of the season. Unfortunately, he's not playing. He's been playing, but he's not been playing all that well recently as well. Maxim Leitch. You do root for those footballers, don't you? You root for those footballers who are honest and forthright. About the pressures of the game and of the jobs and share their experiences, because after all, people need to know that, particularly in this social media age where everybody's happy all of the time. That can quickly, people can, it's not unfair, that you log on to social media and everybody's, look at how great my life is. Well, maybe sometimes it's better that people are honest about how life is, because life is not always great.
Yeah, I think if I was a pro footballer, I wouldn't be on social media, because I mean, if you think after every bad performance, they even get hate mail and things like that, So I mean, a lot of people all over the world, they say, okay, they've got to deal with that because they get paid well enough, but it can't be easy to deal with that.
They're human beings.
So heavily criticized.
They're human beings, period. Doesn't matter what compensated they are. They're human beings. Do we care about our fellow human beings or not? Yeah, or are we just going to be spiteful and jealous of them and say, well, you make more money than me, so
yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah, but anyway, we've gone over a little bit because we got a lot of questions tonight, but let's quickly go through the last 2 or 3 games. So yeah, Freiburg's win at Bochum, this is another one that you look at it and you think it was a routine win. But to be honest, the first half an hour, I think Bochum were by far the better side, and Freiburg was struggling to get it going. But that's what Freiburg and Christian Streich do. They don't always need to play amazingly well, and they can find wins, which for me, this was a sign of how far Freiburg have matured as a team, because probably last season they were also very good, but they had to play well to win games. Whereas this season, at times they played very, very well, but they've also been able to win ugly this season. And especially in the last 2 games against Stuttgart and Bochum, they've not played well in either of those games, but they managed to get big wins, which has kept them in Champions League contention. So as for Bochum, they'll be a bit disappointed, especially in the first half an hour, 40 minutes. They probably feel they could have taken the lead. And if they got the lead, they'd probably have won this game for me, I would think, or at least got a point out of it. But what do you think, Peter? Would you agree with my analysis? Or
100%. 2 teams that I like very much, 2 teams that I would love to see succeed. I think that Streich's new 4-4-2 with Michael Gregoric as a service striker for Lukas Höhler is very solid, as is his solidifying of having Vincenzo Grifo and Rizzo Doan on the wings. I think that Freiburg can continue to steadily improve. They also have a very soft schedule coming up. So I believe that they'll be on the rise once again. I hope they can factor into the title race, at least in an arithmetic sense. Yeah. Maybe they're not a strong enough a team to really factor into it, from a logical sense. But arithmetically speaking, I think that they can hang around the top 4 there for a while and should make things interesting.
Yeah, I mean, even the top 4 would be amazing. Imagine Freiburg and Union both in the Champions League. That would be like Bundesliga heaven, I think, really, wouldn't it?
Don't tease me, man. Don't get my hopes up. I hope that kills you.
Exactly. Yeah. But they are only 3 points off the top, and as you mentioned, they've got Leverkusen and Gladbach next, which they will see as winnable games. Mm-hmm. At home they win most games. Let's be honest. I mean, they're especially since they moved to Europa Park. Actually, a lot of people thought they'd lose the magic of the old stadium. But it's far from happening. Like, I think they've actually only lost about 3 or 4 league games there in 18 months since they moved. So it's been a good move for them. And
Christian Streich is on the sidelines. There's always room for magic when it comes to the
exactly.
price. Always.
Good, yeah, but they are only 3 points adrift at top, so they still have to filter into the title race. So yeah, at the moment, and talking to teams that are still in the title race, only 4 points off the top of the league is RB Leipzig. Not quite as well liked as Freiburg in Germany. I think we can safely say that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was another, I wouldn't say easy win because it was still only 1-0 until 85 minutes, but they've definitely deserved the win. I mean, Wolfsburg, I don't know what's happened to them from an attacking point of view. They only got 0.25 in this game XG, which is pretty woeful for a home performance. They've only got 1 point out of the last 4 games now, and is it just the fact that the Mecha brothers have kind of picked up injuries and lost the form, or what is it, Peter, with them with Wolfsburg now? Because they were so good early on in this second half of the season.
Yeah, they got off to a very good start. They had a good training camp, and they had a very, very good 4-1-4-1 there, which unfortunately has gotten stale. As we were talking about Dortmund Hertha, we were talking about coaches sticking with their same basic constellations, but making tweaks to it. Kovac, unfortunately, and actually I talked about this a little bit in our Rückrunde preview. Wolfsburg, they had a great unbeaten run to end 2022, but they weren't always playing very attractive football. They were sometimes really struggling to find ideas coming out of the midfield builds. And that was a reason why I was concerned about them. And one of the reasons why I thought, they may not get off to such a great start as we start 2023. As it turns out, they did. But the last 2 matches have been absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
And Kovac has real problems now. I mean, he was missing Jakub Kaminski because of illness. So what he tried to do is he put Wimmer on his unnatural side and then started Luca Waldschmidt. When things didn't work out at the half, he brought in Maxence Lacroix, moved Mickey van de Ven out to left back, took Paulo Otavio off and things like this. So he tried to make some changes. None of them really worked. And, he's got to rebuild now because he didn't keep the formation going. And I think that they could be in for a very poor run of form here. And I think that they might miss out on Europe. And of course, if they miss out on Europe, then Kovac's season is considered a failure. Yeah. But the joy of sports, the joy of being a Bundesliga writer, as I said before, is being proven dead wrong. I like being proven dead wrong more than I like being proven right. It's
yeah, well, it's definitely only. I think realistically, the 7th Conference League spot is what's looking the most likely at the moment, because obviously they've fallen right off the pace for Europa League now, and obviously they're out of the cup as well, so they can't get in that direction either. Obviously, they're still in 7th, which is a Conference League place, but they're 8 points behind Frankfurt in 6th now. It's very hard to see them overhauling that. It is very much the fight for 7th place now. And I mean, half of the league is realistically in with a chance of getting that 7th. I would say anyone from 7th, currently Wolfsburg, Gladbach, Mainz, Leverkusen, possibly Bremen, Köln, not likely. Possibly even Augsburg could get into that 7th spot. I mean, Augsburg's probably a big shot, but if they can start improving their away form, then they have a chance to. And I guess just to finish on that, Peter, as well, we've gone a little bit over, but we watched the game on Friday night. It was another big win for Augsburg. Obviously, came very, very late on in the end after, 2 goals disallowed earlier in the match. I mean, it was a funny one, really, because once Augsburg got the win, you looked at it from a positive point of view. You said, they played pretty well. They dominated the game. They had almost 2 goals more than Hoffenheim on the XG. But it was a little bit late in the day, wasn't it, in some ways? They probably should have been able to make the breakthrough earlier. What would you say, Peter, there?
I really enjoyed that watch along with you. I had a great time, and I think that the match was very interesting on a tactical level on both sides. We went through all of the changes that both Pellegrino Matarazzo and Enrico Maassen were making there. We said an awful lot about it in that watch along, and I devoted some time to discussing the state of Hoffenheim, also my tactics column this week. It's hard to see Hoffenheim joining this relegation race, but I talked about why this might be the case. And it might be the case because Pellegrino Matarazzo is running into the same problems that he is with Stuttgart. Namely, he's got a lot of young players who have been called up before their time. Players like Bischoff, players like Aslani, players like Tuhumchu, and Damar even is another one. Justin Che is one who hasn't played yet. And we saw with Stuttgart that Matarazzo was having problems with players like Omar Baez, Alexis TBD, Mohamed Sanko, Wahid Fagir. I mean, these players that were sort of called up too early. Mateo Klimovitz is another great example with Stuttgart. They were called up too early. They were used too early. And then Matarazzo had to bench them, and they had to deal with their bruised egos, and everything kind of sort of fell apart. So that's one reason that you should see Hoffenheim get relegated this season, but one reason they could potentially join the relegation race. I think you and I agree that Augsburg are not relegation candidates, not with the roster that they have, not with the talent that they have. So a good win for Augsburg, who should be able to finish mid-table. Hoffenheim, you just can't believe it with the talent that they have on this roster that they could possibly be relegation candidates. But I went ahead and made a little case for it in the column this week and talked about it at the end of the watch along as well about how this potentially could happen.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, if they keep losing games, then it can definitely happen. Obviously, they've got Dortmund, probably the best team in the Bundesliga at the moment, next up, which...
Oh, God. Yeah.
Although I think I saw Baumgartner, he actually mentioned that this is the kind of game they want to play because it's a game with the big underdogs and pretty much everyone expects them to get spanked, So he believes that this is the kind of game they might be able to fire themselves up for and get a result in.
But I mean, we talked about Dortmund earlier in the pod and just how many players are clicking. The Adeyemi injury is unfortunate, but you've seen Jamie Bino Gittins. You've seen what he's capable of. You have full faith in him to start on the wings, do you not?
Yeah. I mean, I can't see anything but a hammering, to be honest, in that game. I would go for like the best realistically Hoffenheim can hope for is like a 3-1 or something, but it could even get uglier and uglier for them. I wouldn't imagine it to be like 5 or 6 because Dortmund don't need it to be 5 or 6. You know, they've got bigger fish to fry coming up in the next few weeks. But, you know, I still think they'll easily get at least 3 goals past that woeful Hoffenheim defense at the moment. I think we did have a couple of just to finish off with a few of the questions. I think we did have a few requests for people asking for a prediction for Bayern versus Union as well. I can't find the comment, but a couple of people mentioned it. I'm going to go 1-1. I've got a feeling that Union can come away undefeated from this game. What do you think?
That's a good tip. That's actually what the score in the Hinrunde was. So yeah, I think you could probably see a 1-1 draw here. You could, but I think Bayern. I mean, this is just one of those cases where coming off a loss, with all of their players rested, with Nagelsmann not doing any rotations, with him putting his best 11 out there, it could get pretty ugly and it could get pretty brutal, and that would be pretty damn heartbreaking for all of us who like that. But I mean, I would say that a 3-1 Bayern win wouldn't be inconceivable.
Yeah, I think it is possible it could get uglier. I think it got ugly last time Union visited there. I remember, I think last season it was 4 or 5-0.
Yeah, and they dismantled them in a fairly quick lashing last year in the Rückrunde. Andreas Luther, I think the keeper at the time, made a couple of early errors, and that enabled Bayern to open the floodgates. You know, I've seen a lot of comments to talk about, you know, if Union win the title, we're going to go over to Germany and raise a glass. I am personally happy to take anybody who wants to go on a tour of Köpenick. Köpenick is the neighborhood the neighborhood to which Union Berlin belongs, and raise a few glasses. Don't drink myself, but raise glasses alongside of everybody else. That would just be wonderful. We would be.
Or we can go to Kreuzberg and do it. Yeah.
Hey. Tempelhof, Kreuzberg, Neukölln.
Exactly. Yeah. But to be honest, I'd just take Dortmund winning it, though, in truth. I just don't want Bayern to win. I do believe that Dortmund, I'm not going to say the favourites at this point, because obviously they've still got an away trip to the Allianz, but Bayern are the only team that I can actually see Dortmund losing to at the moment. That's the thing. I just think they're looking so good, really.
This season, we had a wonderful weekend. This season it has many twists and turns and surprises in store for us as we move forward. So everybody stay tuned and enjoy it. Enjoy Eintracht Napoli. That's tomorrow, is it?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
It is,
so enjoy that.
And it's going to be a good game, I think. And obviously RB Leipzig versus Man City as well. So we'll have to see that. A few nice comments as well coming in. Paul said, excellent episode. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, guys. Obviously you've had an extra quarter of an hour to what you normally get out of us today. So I think we better finish up there. So if you enjoyed what you saw today, then check out at Over the Bar FB and at Over the Bar Extra. Remember to check out otbfootball.net as well. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But we're getting closer and closer to the big 1,000 as well. So try and help us along by recommending us to your friends and letting us know. Remember, we're not only a Bundesliga channel as well, we're also a football league as well. So any of you lower league English football fans, remember to also check us out. We also have vlogs as well from the lower league English football. So and obviously remember, check out the Stuttgart Cone blog as well if you're interested to know what a Bundesliga match day looks like. So thanks a lot, Peter, again, and we'll see you again next week.
Pleasure, my good man.
All the best. Bye-bye. Ciao.